I'm Sally Birdsall, and I'm welcoming you tonight to the fourth in our series of our Teaching and Learning for a Sustainable World seminar series. And I'm going to begin with our karakia. Please feel free to join in. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa ponamo te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai. Tātou I a tātou katoa, hui e, taiki e. And this is our agenda today. Once again, I'm going to do our brief introduction of our project, but then I'll be introducing our amazing speaker tonight, Ruben Ritzén, and then he'll do his presentation, and then we'll have some time for questions and go over the future seminars, because there's still 4 more to come, and finish with our closing karakia. Now, before Ruben starts, I want to acknowledge our host, Ngā Ara Whetū, our Centre for Climate, Biodiversity and Society. They are hosting us, and you can see there the aim is we want thriving peoples and planetary well-being. A brief note about our project, but I think everyone here knows about it. Our aim to develop our transdisciplinary research network, and this seminar series is part of that, where we are trying to enable collaboration and also hear about what the exciting things that other people are doing. So our 4th seminar, and it's my pleasure tonight to introduce Ruben Ritzén. I'm not sure if I quite got that right, but it's a work in progress. And Ruben, he's a freelance researcher. And he also works as a project manager with a focus on sustainable futures. He's an ethnologist and anthropologist, which is something we don't often come across very often. Normally we come across people with just a single discipline. And he's had several years' experience in using an arts-based methods to create tangible, believable, and emotionally resonant climate futures. And I'm especially interested in hearing about Carbon Ruins, the exhibition of the fossil era, the museum set in the future. So Ruben, I'll stop sharing my screen now, and we're looking forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sally, for that great introduction. And super happy to be here. I'm going to share my presentation. So yes, as I said, thank you all for inviting me, and super happy that you're here. Really great to talk to you all. As Sally said, my name is Ruben Ritzén. I'm a project manager from Sweden who has worked at and with Lund University and with this sort of speculative climate futures project that I will discuss today. And I think without further ado, I would like to throw up this picture just to start with. And the reason that I start with this is just to remind us all of where we're at and where we need to go in terms of the green transition, as well as how fast we need to get there. And of course, you all already know this. But it's just a good image to show that the space that we have for climate action is rapidly decreasing. This image is from 2020 even. So the curve is even steeper actually than this image shows. And despite the fact that we have this very steep or short window of opportunity, we still haven't made anything close to the progress that we need if we are to transition to a fossil-free society. So that, of course, then begs the question, if we are stuck in a fossil society. And I work primarily with and for an organization called Climaginaries, and I will talk a bit about how we think about these things and what we think is necessary or needed in order to actually manage this transition in the small amount of time that we have. Because we think that the fact that we haven't made the transition progress that we need, despite knowing both what we need to do and the short time in which we have to do it, points towards the fact that we are stuck in a fossil society. But this also then begs the question of in what ways we are stuck. Is it technologically, economically, politically, culturally, mentally? And I would argue that usually when we talk about the green transition, at least in Sweden, we tend to discuss the top 3 ways of transitioning that I've listed here. So the technological transition, the economical transition, and the political transition. But the cultural and the mental aspects of the green transition are as important, we would argue, and they are often a bit left out of the discussion. And that's what we try to do in our work, and that is what I will focus my presentation on. Because what we want to do is to get an answer to the question of course, how do we get out of this place in which we are stuck? And to understand how to get out, we need to understand the ways in which we are stuck, of course. And in Sweden, as well as in many other rich countries or regions worldwide, we are currently living in a fossil society. And I'm not extremely well familiar with the case in New Zealand, but I would probably suspect that you also, at least parts of your population, are doing that as well. And living in a fossil society means that we are living in a society which is suffused with, even you could argue, drowning in fossil fuels and fossil resources. And this is something that 3 researchers, Schemann, Wilson, and Carson, have termed petroculture. And this is a very interesting and quite useful term to use if you want to look at the ways in which oil runs through the society that we live in. Because a petroculture is a society which not only runs on petro-based energy, but in which that type of energy consumption has become the foundation for the norms that permeate the society and the idea of what the good life in that particular society is thought to be. So petroculture, for example, is visible in the flights, the ships, the trucks that transport people and goods across great distances. It's the car we take to work, the cement and the steel that make up the buildings which encase us. It's the plastic that wraps around the things we buy in the store or online. It's even part of the server halls, which enable us to stream our favorite shows on Netflix, talk to our friends on WhatsApp, or even what allows me to sit here in Sweden and talk to you in New Zealand here over Zoom. So this suffusion of oil in our society means that, of course, completing a green transition is going to be a challenging process, because it not only requires us to switch to a new form of energy, it means that we have to alter our whole notion of what the good life is supposed to be. And when you are stuck in this dependence on fossil fuels, it's not always the case that you reflect on the fact that you're living in this type of world and that most of what you do has an effect on the climate. And there are scientists and activists and politicians, teachers, who have spent their entire lives trying to prove this to people. And often when these people talk about what the climate might look like in the future, they tend to do it in the way which you see to the right of your screen here. So they communicate the potential change in the climate through charts and political documents, diagrams, etc. And I don't want to talk down this way of communication, because it's extremely important, and it's taken us very far in the transition. If we just look at where the discussion about climate change was 10, 15, 20 years ago, or even further than that. But still, as we saw in this graph I showed in the very beginning, the window of opportunity is still decreasing, and it's difficult to reach people. And this is where we think that we have found a way forward in our climate or green transition pedagogy, you could say, or climate communication. Because in the cultural sector, fictional worlds have long been used to ask questions, to challenge norms, to put issues up for debate, and so on. And many of these worlds and these stories engage a lot of people. So think of Harry Potter, for example, or the Marvel Universe, Minecraft, Stranger Things, Heartstopper. Think of all these fictional worlds, and everyone who visits them daily discusses them with their friends, who dress up as their favorite characters, tattoo logos on their bodies. I think I have like 3 separate friends who all have this Harry Potter Deathly Hallows logo sort of tattooed on their bodies somewhere. So there's an enormous emotional power here. And what does this emotional power come from? And how come that these stories of other worlds are more exciting to talk about and visit than the ones to the right of the screen here? Because we would argue at Climaginaries that the charts and the political documents that you see on to the right of the screen here, they are also worlds, right? They're fictional stories. We can be relatively certain that if we continue on this path that we are currently on, this is what the future might look like. But it's a fictional creation. It is a world. But how come that world doesn't engage and interest people in the same way that Lego or Minecraft or Harry Potter does? Well, we would argue that it's the emotional content of the worlds to the left here, the fictional worlds from the culture sector, that make them more interesting to dwell in and more easy to relate to. And it's this idea of making climate change emotionally engaging that lies behind almost all the projects that we develop at Climaginaries. And I will talk a bit about a couple of the different projects that we've done at the end of my presentation. So what we want to do is to make people interested in exploring these future worlds without fossil fuels, and to do so by combining the power of narrative storytelling with scientific knowledge and research. Because it's very important to stress here that when we create fictional worlds, we don't just make them up out of what we think would be cool, but we sort of do a horizon scanning and look at what technologies, what political initiatives, and so on are in their formative stages today, and what might it look like if we extrapolate on those into the future. But also to make the point that we're not trying to make a prognosis. We're not trying to say that this is what will happen. It is just to present a world of what could happen if we choose to take these or these political initiatives or decisions. And I won't dwell too much on this slide, actually, but just want to say that perhaps some of you are familiar with this concept of transformative change. A systems theorist called Donella Meadows, quite famous in the transition movement, going all the way back to the 70s, 80s. But the reason that we do what we do is because we believe that engaging people through stories and discussing climate change and the green transition through the medium of narrative storytelling is a way of actually achieving this transformative change that we need. That is the change of our society from a petroculture to something beyond petroculture, a society which is more harmonious with the needs of both nature and people. And what Donella Meadows does in this fantastic article, which is called Leverage Points, Places for Intervening in a System, which I can recommend all of you to read, is that she lists in ascending order of influence, she lists initiatives or places in society where you can intervene politically or normatively in order to change a system. And she puts the mindset or paradigm out of which a system arises, and the power to transcend paradigms at the very top of this list. And that is where we argue that storytelling and stories and emotional experiences can come in, because you can adapt taxes and so on, and that's of course also an important aspect of the transition. But when it comes to actually getting people to rethink what the good life is, and their place and their relation to other people, to society, to nature, we enter that sort of sphere of looking at the actual paradigm out of which our petrocultural system arises, and that is where we think that storytelling can play an important role. So this explains why it's important to talk about climate change and the green transition in an emotional, creative, narrative-centric way. But this is not the only thing we think about when we at Climaginaries imagine future worlds. We also think deeply about the ways in which we talk about the future, because the ways in which we talk about the future influence how we act in the present. Because often when people discuss the future, particularly climate futures, they tend to do it either as in terms of a utopia, as a perfect world where all problems have been solved, often through various technological solutions, or they go sort of the binary opposite route and talk about a dystopia, a dark world where everything has gone wrong, life is miserable, and so on. And both of these ways of talking about the future are used to motivate and engage people in the present, either by giving them hope for change, or scaring them into avoiding what terrors might come. But we think that talking about the future in this sort of binary oppositionary way, completely utopian or completely dystopian, can actually instead be counterproductive when it comes to engaging people, and become a sort of passivizing agent instead. Because either, if you talk about a utopian future, people might think that, okay, we have super smart scientists and politicians who will sort this out for us, and everything will work out in the end. So why should I, as a person, do anything? Or if you talk about the dystopian future, the takeaway might be that, okay, well, everything is going to hell anyway. We're all gonna like burn up and in a heat wave 25 years from now. So why should I do anything at all? Isn't it better if I just maximize my my enjoyment at the moment, fulfill all my wants and desires, and fly 4 times around the globe, and so on? So we think that it's important to try and get away from this sort of binary way of talking about the future, and promote what Joanna Macy and Chris Johnston call active hope, which they talk about in this book that you see on the screen here down to the left. And what active hope means for them, there's a whole book about this, and I recommend you it's recommend reading if you haven't read it already. But to sort of simplify it, what they talk about is active hope as a method. It is to acknowledge the problems that exist, that we see in the present, as well as be honest about what consequences these problems might have in the future, but also to not stop there, but also to look at the opportunities in society that we see today that exist for change, and also what we can do as individual persons, both in our private lives and our professional lives, to act on these problems, to counteract them. So it's very much about finding hope in actual action, and shining a light on the space that we all have to work towards a better world. But then, of course, to stress the need to actually do something, and to not just think that things will automatically themselves out because of magical technological solutions. And it's this way of thinking that has permeated our work. So this means that the way in which we envision the future affects the decisions we take in the present. Different choices, investments, political decisions, and so on become more or less desirable to push for, depending on the ways in which we imagine the future. But it's also important to remember that even though we can know certain things about the future, for example, that if we release X amount of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, then we will most likely get Y consequence from the climate system. There are an infinite amount of things that we cannot know, because the future is, per definition, unknown. The future emerges as we live in the present. Actions taken in one place have consequences in a completely different location. New technology changes what's possible. Desires and norms and wills change when new ideas take root. So, and up until now, I've talked about the future, but it might be more correct to talk about futures, plural, because there is not just one future. There's an infinite number of futures out there that all differ in either great or smaller ways. And this then also means that even if the future is depicted as a sort of neutral and closed thing, something that just happens to us and which we cannot affect, that's actually not quite true. Because the future is a political project, and all political decisions contain a narrative of the future. And in turn, this means that whoever controls the future and how the future is described also controls, to a certain extent, what is considered possible in the present. So if the future is described as a robo-technological utopia powered by nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, then that will affect what policies are pushed for in the present. And if the future, on the other hand, is discussed as a world of smaller cities, a greener world, a world dependent on local food production, then that too will lead to a certain type of behavior and certain decisions being pushed for, taken, certain issues put up for debate or discussion. So what this means is that the future is a democratic issue, because the future is not created in the future. It's created here and now. It's a reflection of our present-day society. And these are some of the things then that we have in mind when we develop our projects. We want to create fictional worlds that concretize the climate transition, climate problems, that challenge existing visions of what the future might look like, and invite participants to reflect on what future they want. This democratic aspect of the future. It's about creating spaces where we can relate to the climate challenge on an emotional level, where we can grasp its effects and understand its consequences. And to do that, we believe that the stories we tell of climate change need to be situated, contextualized. So abstract numbers about sea level rise or global mean temperature increase need to be placed somewhere and filled with life. So how do these consequences change people's everyday lives? Who is affected? Where? How? Where are the solutions? Who can change society and how? And finally, the creation of the future, as I've touched upon previously, needs to be democratized. So as I alluded to previously, it's often a certain group of people or actors who get the opportunity to discuss what the future might look like. And we want to spread that opportunity to more people. I think I will actually skip this slide because I want to get to examples of our work in the time that I have left for my transition or for my presentation. And I heard that you were interested in carbon ruins. So that's sort of our flagship project. And that's the one I will start discussing. Because in a way, Carbon Ruins was the project that kickstarted everything for Climaginaries. So Climaginaries started as a collaboration research project about different ways of communicating climate issues, and that then led to the creation of Carbon Ruins. And because of the great success of Carbon Ruins, we have then been able to form an NGO, basically, which is what Climaginaries is now. So we are independent from the university, Lund University, even though we sort of started as a research project there. Well, so what is Carbon Ruins? Well, Carbon Ruins is a museum set in the future. More specifically, Carbon Ruins is a museum set in the year of 2053, 7 years after Sweden has become the first country in the world to have achieved net zero emissions of fossil fuels. And to celebrate this, the Swedish government inaugurates this museum as a way of looking back at the fossil era we have left behind and the many things, events, and movements that played a role in the transition to a more sustainable society. And in the exhibition, we find a number of objects. For example, the steel water bottle, which you see to the left of your screen here. So when the blast furnaces around the world needed to be closed to meet the emission targets in time, there was an acute shortage of steel. And of course, at this point in time, early 2030s, hydrogen steel hadn't really taken off yet. And this meant that all the unnecessary steel became incredibly desirable. So a popular movement and market grew up around sort of second-hand old steel objects, such as filing cabinets and steel water bottles. And the one preserved in the museum is one of the few that could escape this collecting frenzy. And in the museum, we also have an oil platform built out of Lego with the company's own fictitious company, Octan. And Lego, of course, was for a long time an uncontroversial toy that was loved by everyone who didn't get the pieces under the feet in the morning. But when the climate crisis was brought to a head and the young climate movement became tangible in many families, the parents of these children start to look at Lego with new eyes. Because, of course, it was pieces of oil that their children were playing with, the same oil that jeopardized their future. And they felt that something had to be done. So parents travel in hordes to Lego's offices in Billund in Denmark, dress their children up in white shirts and let black ichor goop drip down their sleeves. And this became front page material in many Danish and Swedish newspapers and magazines. And this led to Lego having to change their course to rent and borrow Lego and bio-based plastic pieces instead. So this is a very extremely short rundown of Carbon Ruins. But this is basically what it is. It is a museum of physical objects in which people walk around in, are often usually taken by a guide who tells these stories. And the guide then often asks people to engage in a sort of light-hearted role play session, you could say. So the guide might ask, oh, okay, so talk about the Lego, and then ask, oh, so where were you when you read these stories about this protest against Lego in the 2029 or whatever? And then a person might raise their hand and say, oh yeah, I was with my children and we thought that we hadn't thought about this before, but this was such an interesting, and so people can insert themselves into this narrative, and that is a way to sort of kickstart this imagination process of, okay, so we are living in this form of society now, but it could be different in the future. And to get that emotional connection to, this is what I experienced when I went through these transition years. And then I heard you briefly mention that you had a couple of educators in the audience here. And perhaps this is extra interesting for you. Beyond the Fossil Era is a digitalized version of Carbon Ruins, which is aimed at schools. Swedish upper secondary school, so ages 13 to 16, and then high school, Swedish high school as well, so ages 16 to 19. And this is as I said, is a digitized version of Carbon Ruins that can be used by teachers in class to talk about various aspects of the green transition, and to teach their students about how societies change, and to empower the students to think independently about what future they want to create and live in. So in this exercise, just as in Carbon Ruins, the students time travel to the year 2053. It is a digital version of this future fossil museum. They learn about some of the objects and the stories surrounding these objects. And then where Beyond the Fossil Era differs from Carbon Ruins is that here the students then also get to come up with their own object that they donate to the museum. So they get to think about, okay, so what thing can I see in my everyday life today, in the year 2024, that might be different in the future, and how might that have changed? So they get to write that story about how the plastic pen, for example, changed, or the lawnmower, or whatever thing they see in their immediate surroundings. And this is an exercise that can be used in many different school subjects, or it can be used in just as part of one class, one occasion, or as part of a longer sort of transdisciplinary projects between several subjects. And we also have a version of this material aimed at companies and organizations, because we realized that it's quite, sometimes when we do these presentations and workshops, we have listeners who want to take part in this, but who are adults, they're not in school anymore, and they can't take part in the physical Carbon Ruins guidings. And so we developed a version with more complex stories, which is aimed at companies and organizations as a way of getting them to think outside the box of their own practices and their own fields of work, and how they might think about their own sustainability policies, and provide creative paths forward to transition to a more sustainable way of business. And this is just a quick picture of the digitalized objects of the Fossil Museum. And you can see that the steel water bottle is there as well, as is Lego. We have a whole host of other objects and stories as well. And this means that you can talk about the climate transition and use this material in many different subjects. I don't have that much time left, but this is a sort of sub exercise we have in Beyond the Fossil Era, in which we talk about the different factors and tools for change. That is, the different ways in which society can change. And we make the point, or stress the point, that these, when society changes in a more drastic, radical way, it's usually not a single one of these that's responsible, but it's a sort of interlinked cause and effect web, in which many of these factors play a role. And then, of course, we have soundwalks, and the soundwalks we have developed are, you could say, place-based radio theaters, radio theater productions that are also set in the future and talk about, future worlds. And what's interesting about these is that it's an app in your phone, which is GPS connected to a GPS satellite. And this means that when you open your phone and you click play on this radio theater play, you walk around in a specific neighborhood. And as you walk around, you follow the directions told to you in the play in your headphones. and then it automatically triggers the next part of the story as you enter a specific place on the map. And this then means that you walk around in the very neighborhood in which the future you listen to takes place. So you get this interesting juxtaposition of the society that we live in now and the society of the future. And you can sort of see these interposed on one another. And we've done 2 of these, Memories of the Transition, which talks about transition issues, starting with the occupation of a shopping mall in Malmö in the south of Sweden, and Farewell Falsterbo, which talks about adaptation, climate adaptation issues, and which is set in a small village called Skåne Falsterbo. Talks about sea level rise. And Memories of the Transition, we usually take university classes, school classes, and so on to walk this and reflect upon what they think about the sound walk afterwards. And we have one reflection from a student, a university student here at the master's course, or bachelor's course, I think, actually, who said, when I heard this, I got goosebumps. And from there onwards, I felt like I was part of the society that created the world that is described in 2050. In some sense, I would even say I felt guilty for not doing enough. The full experience of the audio felt extremely real. Sometimes I could not even differentiate between what was real and what noises just came through my headphones. It felt like the imaginary world and the real world melted together to one. So just a good example of this sort of juxtaposition, interposing nature of these sound walks. And then, of course, Farewell Falsterbo, I don't have time to run through this, but it's about climate adaptation issues, centering on a teenager who goes deep into her own family's history about a great storm that drew in over the south of Sweden in 2072. And both of these sound walks are developed in collaboration with a company called Umami Productions. And there's an app called Climaginaries, both in Google Play and Apple. I don't know, I'm blanking on the name of the Apple store, but yeah, you can download it there, it's free. Memories of the Transition, you need to be in Malmö to listen to, but Farewell Falsterbo, there is actually a version which is just it's called a version for any beach. It's just an MP3 file you can hit play on and you can listen to it. So if you want to sort of get an idea of what that experience might be like, you can do it there. Preferably somewhere where there's water, I would say, to listen to it, but you can listen to it on your couch as well. And then just to wrap up, we have also developed a tourist guide to a future climate neutral Skåne. Skåne is the southernmost part of Sweden, where Lund, the university is, and Malmö, where I live, also is. And so this is it's basically a rough planet, a lonely planet guide to what a visitor to Skåne might need to know if they're visiting Skåne in the year 2050. And yeah, it talks about what places you can visit, what norms you need to be mindful of, and yeah, what opportunities exist for you, but also what dangers exist. And this is, you can Google a guide to zero carbon Skåne, and you will find it online. It's also completely free. And we have also, based on this, we have developed a podcast series. And this is only in Swedish, unfortunately, so I won't talk too much about it. But it's a sort of travel show set in this world of the Guide to Zero Carbon Skåne, in which we have 3 characters who visit various parts of this world and talk about their experiences as a way of sort of getting at what the good life, the goda livet, is the good life in Swedish, what the good life is and what that might mean to different people. So to quickly wrap up, the future is open. We imagine the future in any decision we make, and the ways in which we imagine the future affects the decisions that we make in the present. If we are going to follow through properly on the green transition, we need to have imaginative practices and creative practices. And by concretizing, situating, and democratizing climate futures, we allow citizens to return to the present equipped with insights and ideas about their role in the future, what the future could look like, and how we can act today to create this future that we want to see. And of course, have the determination to follow through on these ideas. And of course, that speculation, play, and arts-based envisioning lets us broaden the horizon of potential action in a way that few other methods can. And this in turn also promotes agency. And that is my my talk. Thank you so much for listening. I think I went over time with a couple of minutes. I hope that's okay. I think we still have some time for questions. And my email address is right there if you want to reach out and discuss any of these ideas or issues further down the line as well.